Hey, good evening, everyone. Everyone. Thanks so much for turning out, and we look forward to doing future programs about Celilo. Obviously, it's important to everyone in this room, and I know more people that couldn't get in the room. And we've already been talking about ideas, so please just keep watch on our website, and we'll try and let you all know about the future programs coming up. So I'm Tim Hills, the historian for McMenamins, and it's my pleasure to be part of these programs, and this one tonight is really remarkable that it came together and we got the speakers that we did. Tonight you will see a special, fascinating, and important program about Celilo, obviously, its traditions, its people, and its significance to our collective past and future. And our three speakers tonight are Chuck Williams, Thomas Robinson, and Linda George Meanus. And they'll each separately share with you history and perspective that they've learned and they've known as part of their own experiences. Then at the end of their presentations, there'll be a Q&A period where you will be able to ask questions of them. A quick reminder before I do the first introduction, please check your cell phones and just make sure they're off or at least on vibrate. The first speaker of the evening is Chuck Williams, and Chuck has worn and continues to wear many hats, many of which represent his efforts to preserve, nurture, and celebrate the culture, traditions, and people of the Gorge. He wrote the most thorough history to date about the Columbia River Gorge called Bridge of the Gods, Mountains of Fire. He co-founded Salmon Corps, a program within AmeriCorps, which benefited Native youth and allowed many Native kids to get to college. Chuck has been a national park expert for Friends of the Earth and started the campaign for the Columbia River National Scenic Area. He's also served as public information manager and publications editor for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. So please help me welcome Chuck Williams.
Our main talkers here tonight are Tom and Linda, and so I'm just kind of here to help out and provide some perspective. And I'm Cascade Indian from the village they built the second powerhouse of Bonneville Dam on top of, and I'm rolled at Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. And the Cascades of people who live there are divided up between different reservations, Warm Springs and Yakima, and some Cowlitz and such. And so our fishing grounds were downriver from Celilo. Before they built Bonneville Dam, there was about 5 miles of rapids, and that's where we fished. And Portland gets about 35 or so inches of rain a year. At the Cascades, where the rapids were, gets 100 inches a year. And by the time you get out to the Dalles, it's 12 inches a year. And so Celilo's around 10 inches a year. And so you have this radical transformation in terms of the ecosystems. You go from rainforest to sagebrush desert. And not surprisingly, that also marks the cultural difference. And from the mouth of the Columbia up to just past the Dalles were primarily Chinookan-speaking people. It was a culture based on boats where transportation was mainly by the large dugout canoes, and spoke the Chinookan language. From Celilo upriver, people spoke Sahopton. It was a plateau culture with horses and such. And so Celilo is a transition between two different cultures, and it's also the main gathering place, the main trading center in the Northwest, and people would come from all around, from the Puget Sound, from Montana and such, and trade there, and it was like a big county fair in the summertime. And when treaties were signed here, most of them were in 1855 that involved the gorge, and some people don't really understand them much, but when the treaties were signed, the tribal leaders gave up what are called the ceded areas, and the lands covered by the treaty. About 10% of the lands covered by the treaties were reserved as reservations. That's where the name came from. They weren't established per se, they already existed, and the tribes reserved to themselves sovereign control over those areas. But in the Yakima, for instance, there you have the biggest reservation, Northwest, 1.2 million acres, but the ceded land is 12 million acres, so it's about a tenth of it. But it also showed incredible foresight. Go to the Yakima Reservation or Warm Springs, any of them around, the ecosystems go from the lowest point, like the Deschutes River and the Yakima River, up to the highest point, the peaks of Mount Adams and Mount Jefferson. And by having such a wide spectrum of ecosystems, you have all the plants and other natural sources right there within the reservations. Is incredible thought. And there's a lot of forethought in terms of the areas that are reserved. And so a lot of people wonder why Indians are fishing off reservations. In the 1855 treaties, they reserved the rights to hunt and fish in common with the newcomers, and that's went on, battled for years and years. And it was a matter of the states trying to keep Indians from fishing, and the federal government, the Interior Department's a trustee of tribes, so they have to get forced in to take a legal action. And for years, the fight was between the tribes and the states, which fortunately that's over. But in 1977, when Carter came in and put in a self-government program, and a lot of the monies that used to go to the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, for fisheries, then were given directly to the tribes. And the tribes set up the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commissions and very professional biologists and policy people and such. And so, and since then, the tribes have never lost a case. What used to happen was that the states would open up fishing, and generally downstream from Bonneville Dam is non-Indian fishing, both commercial and sport, and upriver is the tribal commercial fishing. So soon they'd fish the heck out of the runs, and then as soon as the major runs were coming through Bonneville and getting ready for the Indians, they'd shut it down for environmental reasons, for endangered species reasons and such. Keep speaking, and since the tribes formed their own fish commissions, they've never lost a case, and that's all changed. And one of the most important things done was the reprogramming of hatcheries. There were, when Bonneville Dam was built in 1938, Congress passed the Mitchell Act. It was to mitigate for the damage done by the dams. But 18 of the 21 hatcheries supposedly mitigating were below Bonneville Dam, so they had nothing to do with the fish upstream. They just were a commercial catch for the commercial fishermen at that point. And the tribes organized with the sport fishing groups upriver and forced that whole the funding mechanism such to change. And you're starting to see restored salmon runs. Umatilla River now has Chinook and coho for the first time in decades and decades, a big fishery. And so that is a good thing. There's not too many environmental success stories in the Northwest, but the upriver salmon runs and the sockeye, my favorite, bluebacks, call them, are just wonderful. And the gourds are such a wonderful fishing spot because they're so low on the river. For instance, the bluebacks, which you call them, and the gourds, sockeye, upriver, called red. There's like Red Lake and such, but when they come through the gourds, there's no redness. They're really incredible blue on top, and so they're at the prime. And so it's some people say Celilo was probably the best fishing spot ever in the world, but it was incredible, the amounts of fish. And there used to be the most thorough estimates done show that about 16 million salmon used to come up annually in the Columbia, come up the Columbia River every year, between 12 and 16 million. And the tribal biologists have signed off on the upper number. And so now we're getting down, I don't know what the number is, it got down below 2 at one point. And so a lot of the big fights over what's called supplementation, and a lot of the sport fishing groups are real purists and say, well, we don't want any hatchery fish in there, and because they dilute the native spawn. And the tribes are saying, well, if a river doesn't have salmon, we're not going to accept zero salmon. In fact, part of the Bolt decision went to the Supreme Court. It says that half of nothing doesn't fulfill treaty rights. There have to be fish there to share between the Indians and the non-Indians. And so there's been a great great progress on that. Tribes gave up spring Chinook fishing for a couple decades and such, and it's come back where there's commercial season and such. And so when people are fishing off the reservation, they have that right through the decision of the boat decision, US v. Oregon, US v. Washington, went all the way to the Supreme Court. And so those are treaty guaranteed, and they give rights that other people don't have. So they're able to use those treaty rights to stop developments going on and such. And a lot of, when I was working in the Intertribal Fish Commission, we fought a lot of dams and such. We put together great coalitions between sport fishing groups, environmental groups, and the tribal leaders, and it was some really effective political action against the further degradation of fish runs and such. So anyway, I'll be around to ask questions. I just kind of wanted to provide a perspective, and like I say, the transition at Celilo is from the coastal culture, the boat culture, to the the plateau culture and such. And so it's a major transition there, and that makes it even more important. So anyway, like I say, I'm the lesser. It's Linda and Tom are the ones that we're all here to see. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to them. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Eileen Schreiner, and I am a project manager with the Confluence Project, which is kind of the context around how we're coming to see some new and amazing pictures of Celilo tonight. I just want to do a quick survey. How many people here have heard of the Confluence Project? All right, that feels pretty good. Thank you for coming. For those who don't know about the Confluence Project, about 10 years ago, when the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial was being planned, Anton Minthorn, who was then the chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, asked himself, well, how do we want to commemorate this journey by these two guys across the country who wrought so much change on our land and our people? And through a process of happenstance and talking among community leaders, the Confluence Project was born. It is essentially an endeavor to tell the story of the Columbia River through interpretive art pieces designed by Maya Lin, the woman who designed the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, the Women's Table at Yale. And so we have completed 4 of 6 sites at important confluences of rivers where the Columbia has met the Snake or Clearwater. And so we are working now to complete our 5th site at Chief Timothy Park in Nez Perce Homelands. And the last project is a project at Celilo Park. Celilo Park is a park run by the Army Corps of Engineers, 11 miles east of the Dalles. And what we have planned there is to refurbish that park with traditional or indigenous plants and with interpretive artwork that Maya Lin has designed to try and begin to tell the incredible story of the place that you see in this picture here and that you'll see more pictures of. Part of that artwork is a Celilo Arc, which is a 500-foot long walkway that you can walk on to access the river's edge that tells the story of Celilo Falls. And it's inspired by the fishing planks that you will see in pictures. And there will be some other exciting interpretive elements there as well. But that's just the tip of the iceberg on Celilo's story. And so part of this work is to create an interpretive website that helps the First Peoples tell their story at the park. So you get to hear that as you're walking over the grounds and looking at the river and looking at the flat water. The Dalles Dam inundated Celilo Falls in 1957. And so through this interpretive website, we are going to offer people the chance to hear stories about the falls and see pictures and watch historic film footage about what this place was like and what it has meant then, what it means now, and what we suspect it will continue to mean in the future. And so we have had the opportunity to work with Tom Robinson to collect some maybe rare pictures of Celilo and have conversations with folks who grew up there, with people like Linda Meanus, who you'll have a chance to hear from later. And so we are really excited to begin the dialogue with you all about what this can mean, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these pictures as well. So thank you, Tom.
We've turned the, turned the mic up as about as loud as we can so the people in back can hear. Can you hear fairly well? And we're trying to keep the feedback to a minimum, so we'll try that balance. Not working. Our second presenter tonight is Thomas Robinson. The last time Thomas made a presentation at this History Pub series was exactly 3 years ago. 3 years ago, where he spoke about the removal of Portland's black population from their homes in North and Northeast Portland due to racism and gentrification. As bad as that was, the treatment of Indians at Celilo is an order of magnitude more disturbing. Celilo was the most productive fishery in North America, and Celilo Village is the oldest community in the Western Hemisphere. 20 years ago, Thomas created a photo exhibition about Celilo Falls, which spent 4 years touring the region, at which time he spoke at many museums, universities, and Indian reservations about Celilo. He has continued to do extensive research about its history ever since. While it's tragic that Celilo Falls is history, we're glad there are people who keep it alive in their heart. Please welcome Thomas Robinson.
Celilo Falls is an ancient site. It's been inhabited for 11,000 years, and the name itself is also ancient. It's an Indian name. But the story of the assimilation of the name Celilo into the English language is a story of its own. This is the first time the word Celilo appeared in the Oregonian. It was December 15th, 1862. And at the time, the Oregonian referred to the falls as the Columbia River Falls, or as Tumwater, or as the Chutes, like Lewis and Clark did. The word Celilo was used by the steam navigation company to indicate warehouses that they had built next to Celilo Falls. Celilo Falls was the furthest that one could navigate on the Columbia River. And after Celilo, you would have to unload the ships and portage on the wagon road around to the Dalles, an 11-mile stretch. And this is what they were talking about with Celilo. Here's another shot of it. It was said to be the longest warehouse in the world, 1,100 feet. This is what served as the staging area for the hundreds of gold rush cities that were built in Idaho and eastern Oregon and Washington during the Civil War. In 1863, Celilo became a rail station too, when Oregon's first railroad was built. So all of a sudden, every passenger ticket and every schedule, every bill of lading, all said Celilo, and that is how Celilo became known to everybody. It wasn't until the middle 1880s that people started to use the word Celilo Falls. The first time that it was used by the Oregonian was 1891. This is the 1880 census for Celilo. There were 367 people living there, of which 43 were Chinese. But Indians weren't enumerated in any census until 1900. This is the first Indian census, And you can see Tommy Thompson is there. He's the chief and also the head of his household. It's doubtful that the person who enumerated this could speak Sahabatin, and we know that the Thompson family did not speak English, so it's I can see that his daughter is young Liz, and his mother is Crazy Liz. This is Indian humor being played out 113 years after this was enumerated. This is a 1902 view of Celilo Falls and the industrial complex next to it. This is the Taffy fish wheel operation, which also doubled as an ice factory in the winter. The Celilo Canal hasn't been built yet. That would be 12 years ahead. The train was in. You can see the tracks there. But that would have to move when they put the canal and everything in. Celilo is much more than the horseshoe falls that you see on all the postcards. This is an aerial photo that was taken right after World War II, and it shows the enormous amount of area. This is the horseshoe falls that you see in the postcards. This is the main falls here. But the fishing was done all the way down here through the railroad bridge. All those support structures for the bridge had ladders on them. And during the spring, the water was too high to fish here at the falls, and most of the fishing was done here and in other islands. So where the fishing was, when the river went up and down so drastically before all the dams were in, you know, where the fish was just a moving target. But here is the Horseshoe Falls, and the foot, and you can see that they have a footbridge here to Chinook Rock. Every year, the spring floods would come along and wash everything away. So all the platforms and this bridge would be dismantled and hauled away on trucks and brought back and rebuilt the next year. So we see the same lumber being used over and over again. But the supports are different. That's the only way that you can date unidentified pictures. Here's another shot of Chinook Rock. You can see the bridge going across to it. And the island to its left, that's Standing Island. And this is the area, this is a movie film of that area. This is the Horseshoe Falls area. You can see how much mist and how much water is in the air and how turbulent the water is. This is where the Columbia River turned over on its side. The footbridge was replaced by cable cars. You can see a cable car going from the mainland to Chinook Rock in this film clip. On the other side of Standing Island, which is on your right here, on the left is Chief Island, and this is the channel in between Standing Island and Chief Island. And dip netting was the way that Indians most used to collect fish, spearing being one of the other ways. But these people are using movable dip nets. And there were two kinds of dip nets, a stationary one that stayed in one place and movable ones that people would sweep through. These worked best here because the water was very turbulent and the fish couldn't see. So this kind of net, the way it worked is that the net was attached to the hoop with rings and it was secured by a leather tongue. When the fish struck the net, the tongue pulled free and the net would purse around the fish, making it impossible for the fish to get away. The pole would just be lifted hand over hand up to the platform to collect the fish. this is Celilo's main channel here. And it's not far from where the last picture was taken. That channel is what you see in between the rock on your left, which is Chief Island, and the one on the right, which is Standing Island. But up there is Albert Brothers Island. The Albert Brothers, here's another shot of the Albert Brothers Island. You can see that they've poured concrete barriers in the middle of the island. The Albert Brothers were two Yakima Indians who built these illegally in 1940, and they bullied a lot of other Indians off of the rocks, and they challenged the power of the chief and the Indians to regulate and share or fish like they traditionally do. The Indians had formed the Celilo Fish Committee 5 years earlier, in 1935, to handle disputes like this. The Fish Committee was represented by the Warm Springs, the Umatilla, the Yakima, and the Columbia River Indians. And on the right of this photo is David Miller, who was the secretary of that committee, and he was instrumental in forcing the Albert brothers to sign an agreement where they would share the area under the supervision of Chief Thompson and the committee. And that ended one of the nastiest squabbles among the Indians who visited the falls to fish. Here's another cable car. This one is going it's going to the Albert Brothers Island from the Oregon shore. Is there anybody who could turn this microphone down a little bit? It's ringing like crazy. This catch is typical of Columbia River salmon born before the dams were built. Fish were big and rich in oil because they traveled 1,000 miles to spawn in Canada. The size of a fish is proportional to the length of their journey to spawn. The largest of the fish became extinct when the Grand Coulee Dam was built in upstate Washington and blocked 1,000 miles of Canadian river. We've talked about the different kinds of nets, and that's a stationary net. And these are the same platforms that you just saw in Horseshoe Falls. You can see how fishing by a stationary net works. The net is resting on the bottom of the pool, and you can see the boom arm hanging off of the platform right here with a string going down to the net. What's happening is that string is holding the net open because it's going against the current. It's trying to catch fish swimming against the current. And the second string from the net is being held in the Indian's hand, so that when a fish lands in the net, he can pull it up. This is the same Indian as you saw in the last photo. He's got the same hat on and the same pair of Chuck Taylor All-Stars, but he's changed the rest of his clothes. It's a different day, and it's a different platform. Indians who didn't have a family stand could fish at any stand that was unoccupied and would take turns doing it. One reason I picked this picture to show, it shows a tourist standing behind it. She's got a Kodak Brownie camera under her arm. The peak of the fall fish run often coincided with the end of the Pendleton Roundup, which was Eastern Oregon's largest event. Celilo was right on the way home for everyone who lived west of the Cascades. People would pull over at Celilo and buy a fresh fish right out of the river from the Indian who caught it. Celilo was also one of Oregon's most picturesque sites, and it was a good place to use up all the film that was left in your camera after the rodeo. Here's another view of Dalles Channel. This is looking down it, and you can see where it was in relation to the Horseshoe Falls. It was one of the few areas where women and children could safely fish too. It was kind of a rare picture of women fishing on Dalles Channel there. And this is a site looking up. This one was published in that book, Wild Beauty. And it shows looking all the way up to the parking lot. You can see how easy it was for people to access Celilo Falls. Celilo Falls was a busy industrial site that yielded tons of salmon every hour. Traffic and congestion were often heavy on Highway 30. The 2 lanes ran through the middle of Celilo Village. Dwellings were on both sides of the road, and pedestrian accidents were common. Frequently, the victims were the very youngest and oldest of Celilo's residents. And perhaps most annoying to the Indians was the loss of privacy caused by the relentless invasion of tourists. There was nowhere to escape the people standing above the falls and in the village, pointing and gesturing. This is the oldest overview of the Celilo Village that I have. It was taken about 1928. The gas station hasn't been built yet. Did I change slides? Yeah. And the gas station was built right there. And these railroad tracks are still in the same place. The old village was this 9-acre site. It had been taken by the Army in 1915 when they built the canal and given to the Indians to live on. And this, I'm not sure what all these structures are. This was the Celilo store. It was a convenience store. The longhouse stands about right here today. Some of the houses, the ones the most in this direction, are right here. Here's a view, same year, about 1929, from the other direction, looking at the old Celilo village here. Did I go too fast there? Yeah, I was going to show you the grocery store. Sorry. This is the Celilo. Sorry. This is the Celilo grocery store, and this is a typical house in the old part of the village that was removed to make way for the dam. This part was about equal fish drying structures and homes. This one shows Edna David and Stella McKinley in a salmon fish drying shed. In 1939, they built the first longhouse. And I think it was inspired by the Warm Springs house. The Celilo Indians would go there for the spring root festival every year. But the Celilo longhouse was much larger. And a close-up of the people. This is the opening day, the first day the new longhouse was opened. On the left is Chief Tommy Thompson, and then is Nippo Strongheart, who was an Indian who worked in Hollywood. He advised on Native American matters to many filmmakers and appeared in a number of movies himself. Henry Thompson is next to him, and on your right is Chief Joe Charlie. He's Yakima. The men are probably the financiers of this building. The person holding the drum, that's Chief Thompson's personal drum. I don't think they'd just be holding that for any reason. This is what the interior of the new longhouse looked like. And here's a picture of the exterior and the village in 1945. Chief Thompson remarried during World War II. His previous wife had passed away, and he married Flora. This is the oldest picture I know of them together. I'm not sure exactly how long they've been married. But the Oregonian, when they published this, they noted that the chief's ceremonial clothes contrasted with the work clothes of his harassed young wives, whose responsibility was to see the hospitality maintained over the 3-day festival. These are some of the people who came to visit. Indians who are called comers, who come from other places to participate in the Feast of the First Salmon. They come from Idaho, Montana, all over. More traveling Indians. And the kids, of course, you can see Chief Thompson's there too, and that's Flora next to him. There was room for everybody in that longhouse. You know, I wanted to show a picture here. This is an interesting picture showing Celilo Village in the snow. The relocation had begun. This is in the early 1950s. The old village is still there. The 1939 longhouse is still there. These are surplus, prefabricated war surplus housing that was stored in Madras and repurposed here. This is the chief's house. That's his firewood shelter there. And this is where Chief Thompson and Flora lived. And some of these buildings are still here. I think this one is. This one burned down. I think that one's gone. But you can see the train track is still about where it is there. When this is a picture of Chief Thompson appearing at a civic event. This is a meeting of the 50/50 Club of the Portland Businesswomen's Club. In front is Martha McCowan, and she is the writer of 2 books about Celilo. She had long been an advocate for Celilo Indians, and she made arrangements for Thompson to speak at many events to try and drum up support for their people, because by the fall of 1949 they were facing imminent forced relocation. They just tore all those places down. People just had to go find someplace else to live. The first book that she wrote is Linda's Indian Home, and this features Linda, who would be here right next. This book was published in 1956, and her 2 books are probably the best source of information we have about daily life in Celilo Village. With Celilo doomed, Oregonians swamped the falls in the village. This is the 1954 Feast of the First Salmon. The village put on its best face for the invasion of tourists. Here, during the last fishing season of September 1956, Miss Buster George and Rachel Edmo of Celilo Village posed for the photographers endlessly. For those of you who know the Portland poet Ed Edmo, the lady in back is his mom. And I had to put this in the show. Here is a young Ed Edmo called Young Eddie Edmo. He got his picture in the paper. This is April 1955, fishing at Celilo. Only a few people are left fishing at this October 5th, 1956 picture. The season is over. The equipment is being dismantled for the last time. And the falls would be deserted within 2 weeks. The last public appearance of Chief Tommy Thompson, photographed here with his wife Flora, taken as they were arriving at Celilo for the feast of the first salmon in May 1957. This is after the falls had already been submerged. Thompson came to say farewell to the salmon and to the falls at the annual festival. After the ceremonies, he returned to his room at the Hanby Nursing Home in Hood River, and according to newspaper accounts, on the night of his return he had nightmares which caused him to climb over the guardrails of his bed, and he fell and fractured his right hip. Surgeons put a steel pin in his hip, but the next year's salmon feast went on without him. The elderly chief never personally attended or went to Celilo again. He lived another 2 years, and he passed away in 1959. And that ends my portion of the show. And I think that, you know, all the people whose countenances we've seen in the slides that have passed on, and Celilo Falls itself is submerged, permanently underwater. But, you know, the dam can't live forever. And one day it's going to rise again. Thank you.
Our final speaker tonight is Linda George Meanus. She's a tribal elder of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. She's the great-granddaughter of Tommy Thompson and Flora Thompson. Tommy Thompson, as Tom shared with us, was the longtime chief of Celilo Village until his death in 1959 at age 114. He led the fight to prevent the Dalles Dam from being built. Linda was an instrumental participant in the 50th commemoration of the destruction of Celilo Falls in 2007. She also is a returning student to Portland State University, in part a fulfillment of a promise she made to Chief Tommy and Flora Thompson. Linda feels strong about the mission to keep the traditions and memories of Celilo alive and devotes much of her time and energy to carry that mission forward. Please welcome Linda Meanus.
Thank you. I'm very honored, and I'm very honored to be here, and it's a pleasure to see everyone. When I first heard about this presentation, I think it was Roxanne asked me, "How come you're not on this flyer?" And I said, "What flyer?" This is the presentation that Thomas and Chuck are doing. Oh, okay, I'll see about it. So I end up talking to Tim about it, and so here I am. But I felt really honored to do this because I think it's important. People need to know about how important Celilo was to our people. The importance of how our way of life was and how it was destroyed for the Dalles Dam. A way of life that we still carry on today. Our salmon is part of our sacred foods. We live for, we struggle for, we survive for. So we always have our salmon, our first foods is the salmon, the roots, and the huckleberries. It's hard to keep and hard to get because other people come and take what belongs to the people. But anyway, I'm here to present some of the pictures that were given to me at the 50-year commemoration. So this is part of the petroglyphs that were still along the river. And I think the only one that's still standing is the She Who Watches on the Washington side. And this is part of, I think, the petroglyphs that went under when the falls went down. But they did a sonar thing that the falls and the petroglyphs are still there. So it was meant not for Celilo to be flooded. This picture here, I was really glad to get back. It's called the Wind Rock. And the purpose of that was we needed to have more salmon for our feast. So my grandfather and my grandmother, they would go up there and pray and leave a gift of something so that we would have more fish for the feast. And if the wind blew, then we were going to have more salmon. That was just part of our culture thing that they always did. But I believe this rock they have that they destroyed, I think is at Warm Springs, isn't it, Norman?
I'm not sure. There's one up in Umatilla too.
Umatilla? Okay. But yeah, it was just part of what the older people would do, was to go up there and pray and leave something in that rock, and the wishes would come true. So this is, I think when the salmon would go spawn or just go home for the winter and come back for spring, the river would go down. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I was telling Tim about this rock formation right here. Anybody knows it's the shape of a salmon? There was a story about this. My grandmother told me that when we didn't have enough salmon for the feast, Coyote gave himself up, went up to the hills, talked to the Creator, and asked that he would give himself up to be a salmon to feed the people of the river. So when he turned himself into a salmon, he came down the hill. But when he got down there was a lot of salmon in the river, so he just stayed there to watch over the people. So it's still there. This is just the picture I think Tom had of a smaller version of the river. A lot of times us kids tried to go across that, but our grandfather said the rules and regulations was no kids to be down there, but we'd sneak down there. This picture was taken before we had to pose for those pictures. My grandmother, my grandfather, and me, they took these pictures before they flooded the falls. I think I was 6 years old. But she was teasing him around it. Why, you're going to pose for all your 3 other wives. So my grandma was the 4th wife. So yeah, this headdress here, it is still at the Warm Springs Market in Warm Springs. So Grandma had to trade that to get salmon for the salmon feast, so it's still up there. But the only reason she did that was so that she could feed the people, because in those days we didn't have money. We always bartered, we always traded foods for roots or whatever, any kind of material, stuff like that to feed the people. This is an awesome picture of him posing. This bag, this is the famous picture. Yeah, this bag right here, I've been wanting to get back. It's hanging up at the Charburger in Cascade Lodge. Everybody's seen it? But it was also something that my grandma did, was to barter, was to trade, because that's what we did in those days. We never had money. We always just traded things because they were valuable to us, and they still are today. This picture here, this little dog, if it was a dog, I was wanting to have that picture, take that dog in that picture with me, but Grandma said that dog doesn't belong to us, so we're not going to have that picture taken with us. So I ended up pouting, and that's why that I still look like that today, don't I? But this picture here is when they celebrated the bird that my great-grandfather had carved out, the gold bird. And I think I was about 4 years old in this one. But this chief was here, I think was from Yakima. His wife and great-great-grandma right here. I couldn't remember her name. Washings, I think her name was. But they were praying to the Creator and blessing that bird that's still standing over the longhouse. This was one of many dresses my grandmother had. I think she had about 50 buckskin dresses. And she had a lot of stuff that she had made. She was an avid bead worker. I guess that's where I came in too. But she always just taught me that, you know, beadwork is important because it teaches you about patience and tolerance, about focusing on the important things in life, spirituality. And then it was also to pray for the things that are important, family, life. This is the bird that's hanging over the village now. This is the bird that my grandfather had carved. His Indian name was either Cooney or Lawit, which meant great warrior. My grandma, this is, my grandma's Indian name was Lamush, who I'm named after. And this is Thomas Yallop, who is the chief and also grandfather from the Yakima tribe. And the old longhouse, I wish we still had that one. It was a lot of fun. Okay. I'm not sure who this was. I think my grandma said this was my dad fishing here. My dad was Levi George from Yakima. And this is how they had to wear those ropes or they couldn't fish at all. So it was part of the rules and regulations of fishing. So without those ropes, they'd probably fall in. So. This one is Henry Thompson. He was the oldest son of my great-grandfather, Tommy. Sitting there waiting for the fish to come in. And I just really miss the falls. Okay. Yeah, I was telling Tim, I says, you know, every time I would drive to Celilo, I always was wanting to hear the roar of the falls and the mist on my face, the smell of salmon. Anybody see the ghost of Celilo? Yes. That was awesome, wasn't it? Wish you could bring it back. These guys snuck off on there. They weren't supposed to go over there, but they got in trouble for going over on that. So. Yeah, back in those days, they used to be over 100 pounds salmon. Sturgeons were really big size too. This, go ahead.
Okay.
This picture here is Grandma had asked him how come he didn't want to wear his buckskin dress, that he wanted to look like official, to see what it felt like to wear a suit. And so this was when, I guess, President Nixon was coming to Portland to sign papers for the falls. For the dam. His favorite actor was Audie Murphy, so he wanted to act like him. And this is where they had to, our grandmothers and aunties had to dress up for the president when he came. These were, I think, the four chiefs from the different tribes, from the Yakima, Warsprings, Umatilla, Nez I think we had some from Nespilum and different other tribes. And my grandma right there. I'm not sure who this guy was, but I think he was part of the Corps of Engineers. This is my grandfather, Tommy, Henry Thompson, Jimmy George. I don't know who these other guys are. And they were smoking a peace pipe with this gentleman. I wasn't sure what was in there, but I'm pretty sure it was tobacco. But this pipe was buried with my great-grandfather when he passed. Yeah, this is his favorite shirt, was pink. But he wanted to, I guess, see what it felt like to wear a pretty shirt like that. I thought that was great on him. And these were my uncles. But he was teaching them how to do gill nets, how to make them, because he started them out young. He was giving orders for the fishermen. They'd go out at 5 in the morning, and they'd quit at 6. Because we always did a timely manner, how to do fishing. Everything we did was timely, so everything we got done on time. This picture, I think, is when they got married, because Grandma only had one feathered in now, but when you wear 2, you're married, so Grandma was his 4th wife. And this is me when I was a baby. Martha Ferguson McCune. This was the first book she wrote, was Linda singing home about me growing up at Celilo. And this was I was surprised to get this book back. Someone had given it back to me. It was written by my grandmother. It was found at Powell's bookstore. This is how we slept. They'd put us in a swing like this. That was my board I slept in, and they put me in the swing to put me to sleep, because Grandma then would be either cooking or canning or filleting the salmon. This I had gloves on because I had chicken pox. And this is where they were telling me stories and talking to me in my language, singing songs to me. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I'm just thinking about those days. Yeah, this is a very, I just kind of remember the stories and the songs that they used to sing to me when I was little. I still remember this when I first got out of the hospital. I didn't like being in there because I didn't know what it was. But that's a color. Skiing is what they put us in to put us to sleep and stay out of trouble. This is my mother. She was 16 when she had me, and I was just out of the hospital. So this, we were getting ready for the salmon bag, and I didn't like wearing my little wing dress, so that's why I was pouty. This is the second book, Come to Our Salmon Feast, still written by Martha Ferguson McCune. I've been wanting to get this one republished because I don't think a lot of people know about this book. It's more about the salmon feast. So this is the annual salmon feast we have every year in April. That's how big the salmon used to get. This is part of, this is the Thompson brothers. This is part of our spirituality tradition, things that we do when we have our salmon feast, is they sing 7 songs or 21 songs. It's called 7 drums or called wash it, which means for 7 days of the week or 7 generations. So the songs that we sing is about the creation and about the Bible. This is the old longhouse. It was a lot bigger than the ones we have now, I think. And my grandma Effie right there, getting ready, cleaning up the tule mats. Those were our tables that we used for the salmon feast, that we put on the ground, so we're closer to Mother Earth. This year I thought was, I don't think they do anymore, they called Waluksha. It's where they play cards. I think it was the first casino. Where there'd be payday for them, so that grandma said, I'll be out there playing cards and winning each other's money. We're playing over my grandfather right here. This year they're getting ready for the root feast or the salmon feast. These are all the grandmas that were peeling roots and peeling potatoes, probably talking about grandkids. And I think this is where my grandfather was teaching the boys about the right and the wrongs about fishing and about things that they're not supposed to do. This is Henry Thompson and his wife. My Aunt Rosalind Yellow and her father Thomas. This is the dress that we wear when we go to salmon feast. It's called a wing dress. And the furs is otter fur. The belt. This is the original way we cook salmon, because it's better tasting that way. We still practice that yet. So I would invite you guys to our salmon feast in April. Come check it out. You can taste it right now. Smell it too. Yeah, this is the old way how everybody was just involved. They just get their dresses and put the aprons on, and they just knew what they had to do. So this is what the elders like, was the fish heads. It was the best part of the salmon because it had protein, nutrients, antitoxins, and they say the eyes is good for eyeball soup. That's what I heard from Edmund. This is they got a break from cooking all day long, cooking for thousands of people. I think the most we ever had was 7,000 people they cooked for. So they took a break, and this is my aunt, Catherine Jim. She was, I don't know if you guys knew 8-Ball. His nickname was 8-Ball Jim. That's my uncle. This was his mom. And this here is the salmon feast, is where we put the tule mats on the ground, just on the ground, no floor. And we put the plates and everything, then we put water in the cups, just the bottom of the cups, where we give thanks for the foods provided by Mother Earth. And then we eat, they sing, and then we take little bits of food for the spirit. Little pieces of salmon, deer meat, roots, and huckleberries. And then we give thanks, and then we eat in silence to enjoy the foods. And then at the end of the meal, we drink water for giving thanks for the foods, so that we still do that. Whenever we have a feast is what we do. We practice that yet. I think most tribes do that. So. But we have a lot of people that come from all over Canada, Montana, Idaho, Utah. We had a lot of people from different areas. We even had some people come from New Zealand just to come to the salmon feast, to trade. This big drum here, it was a horsehide that they made. That was one of the biggest drums I've ever seen. So it was always the older men that sang, but when the kids wanted to learn, they had to learn a song in order to be on that drum. So everybody had to learn their own songs. Just the men got to sing. The women were just backups. This here is the veterans, the round bustle dance. I think we only had the round bustle and the chicken dance. We never had fancy or grass dance. It was always just the round bustle and the chicken dance. So these were all the young men that were on their way to the war. So we honored them with this dance. And these were, it's called an owl dance, where the women ask the men to dance, and if the men don't dance, then they get fined. Yep, this was the young maidens. You can tell they all have one feather. This is, I think, the old village before they had the railroad track built, where they took them down. I thought it was great because it's a colored picture. Anybody remember them cars? Yeah, I think they were talking about what to do, whether to go to town and get food or what. But I know when I asked my grandmother how old Grandpa really was, because there was different stories of how old he was. Some said 104, some said 107, but Grandma said he was really 114. Lived on salmon every day, so I like to be that old, I think. This here, this is what I was talking about. This is the one that's still in Warm Springs at the store. Grandma said it took him 3 days from Celilo to get to Warm Springs on horse and buggy through the snow. You can see the wisdom in his face. This picture was taken after Grandfather's funeral. It was April 10th, 1959. She had a video of my grandfather's funeral that Tom McCall was the narrator. when he was, before he became governor. I think she was getting ready. This one here is my brother. He's the chief now, Olson. And this is Thomas Morning Owl, right here. He's the one that played the chief in the Ghost of Celilo. These are all my nephews, grandsons that are learning how to sing. So they teach them young. This is my brother, the chief, and his kids. And this is me when I was, what, 40 pounds. No, I'm a cancer survivor. This was, I think, back in 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. This was taken at the commemoration, the 50-year commemoration of the inundation of Celilo. I think I was watching the canoe people coming down from Puyallup, or I was looking at the salmon coming down on the rocks there. This is during the commemoration. We were getting ready to clean the fish and stuff. And this lady here, she was a county sheriff in the Dalles. She'd always pick up my grandma and I take us back to Celilo. But she passed away last year from cancer. But I got to meet her when we were both in the nursing home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So actually, if you want to stay up here, now, we're going to open up to questions for all three of the speakers. You might have to shout out as best you can, but raise your hand if you have a question. Of course.
Wanted to add a couple things to wrap up. When the Department of Fisheries did the environmental impact statement for the Dalles Dam, they said yes, it was true that the Dalles Dam was going to hurt fish runs, but it would have the side benefit of ending Indian fishing, and thus it would have a net positive gain for salmon runs in the Columbia. They didn't figure that we were going to use boats or anything, I guess. And so, but part of that was when they built Bonneville Dam in '38, the Corps of Engineers promised the tribes 400 acres of in lieu fishing sites, new sites in lieu of the ones that had been flooded by the dam. 50 years later, we had 5 sites totaling 42 acres. And so the tribes got a bill through Congress ordering the Corps of Engineers to give us the rest of our 400 acres. And they're just finishing up the last one. We never did get any of the housing promised for Bonneville Dam, but when they were celebrating the Lewis and Clark, whatever you want to call it, about a decade ago, they went to the tribes and weren't too happy about the Oregon Trail, where we're always referred to as people who used to live here along the Oregon Trail, and said, we don't want any more plaques, we want something positive, and demanded that the tribe's share of the money to celebrate the Lewis and Clark go to build the housing at Celilo. And so finally, 50 years after the Celilo Falls were flooded, we're finally getting the housing we were due. So anyways, kind of seems to wrap it up.
Are there any questions?
Sure, I'll start off. Is there any movement within the tribes and maybe within the greater Oregon community to start some kind of petition for the federal government to bring the falls back? Just maybe once every 10 years, just to open the gates at the Dalles, to close the dam behind it, just to lower the level of the water in the Columbia enough to bring Celilo back for a day, a weekend, a week, maybe once every year, every 5 years, every 10 years.
Well, since I have the microphone, I'll answer this to the best of my knowledge, is that from what I was told by Indians, is they thought that it would just break their heart all over again. And they wanted it left, as it is. I think there is a lot of feeling that the dam has a finite life expectancy, and the falls will come back. That's prevailing. Does anybody else want to?
I was working for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission when there was a big move to do that, to expose it for just one of the anniversaries. And talked around, most of the elders are kind of saying, just like Tom was saying, it'd be just too heartbreaking to see it come back and go away again. And so they ended up, most of the tribal leaders decided they didn't want to take part in that. So.
Too hard to say something.
Are there questions? Over here.
Was there any opposition to the flooding of the falls that was taken seriously by the government, or was it totally dismissed?
There was a lot of opposition. The opposition was from commercial fishermen and from the Indian tribes themselves. And just in Oregon, there was certainly a lot of disorganized opposition. People. Leafy Foster, who took many of the pictures that you saw in Linda's presentation, he told me that in the 2 years before Celilo Falls was inundated, that more film was exposed there than anywhere else in Oregon. So there was a lot of pushback from people who thought we were really losing a lot here. And that the dam had been put at a different place. But really what the kicker was the Vanport flood. The Army hadn't been getting very far until Oregon's second largest city was wiped away in 5 minutes by a flood. And that became the poster child for the project. And it was much more difficult hurdle to overcome because it was a public safety issue.
I have someone here I'd like to bring up, Karen Jim. She is a resident elder from Celilo, and I'd like to have her say something. She is the daughter of the late Chief Howard Jim.
I'm the big mouth. I like to speak on behalf of Celilo. I'd like to let you know that Linda, George, and I are the best mud pie makers of Celilo. That's all we did. I'd like you to know that presently the Indians of Celilo refuse to move from Celilo. Our livelihood and our culture and our religion comes from the Columbia River and from Celilo itself, the falls. When the dam was created, they did negotiations with the 4 tribes in the Northwest: Umatilla, Warm Springs, Yakima, Nez Perce. And a lot of times people don't know where that money went to when they sold the falls. I read through the history of the old man, which Linda didn't mention. He lived to be 112 years old. Oh, 114, excuse me. And our people refused to move. When you heard Miss George talk about the commemoration, we waited 50 years for our homes to be replaced in Celilo. 50 years. And they sold Celilo Falls, enrolled us people all along the Columbia River, and sold our falls for $26.7 million. That is not even a drop in a bucket compared to your light bill you paid today. And our people were not crazy about this in Celilo and along the river. Chief Tommy Thompson got our checks. Well, some of them were $6,000 per person, and you had to be 21 to get this check, and up to the year 1957. So the day the big check came to Celilo for Celilo Falls, and the falls was covered, Chief Tommy Thompson took our checks, tore them. And some of us, like Linda and I, when we turned 21, I knew what that money was. I knew what it meant. I did not care. I told my mom, you take this check, I know what it means, and I don't want it. I'm a pretty smart person. I had 3 scholarships. I didn't need it. And when we had our commemoration, a lot of people, photographers, artists, elders, young people, there was just so much to go through. And they have a song about the people in Celilo called the Echo Song. And YM has to do with part of Echo of the Falls. The elders used to say, Celilo Falls may be covered, but it echoes, the falls echoes in my heart. So we're called the Echo people. And that's what YM means. And some of the elders used to say, you know, just like an emerald forest, if the frogs would come, it would flood the dam and we would have our dam back. It's just sleeping right now. And it's not a sad thing to us because we know it's there. And the people of Celilo are there to protect what is there. And the fishing and the religion, the culture still goes on. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, back there. Yes.
Is there a tribal school, or in what ways is your language being passed down to your children?
Language being passed down to the children.
Yes, there is. They have Amber, there is a school there at Celilo, isn't there, for the kids to learn. They put them there, and I think on some of the reservations they are teaching the language to keep it going, because we're losing too much of what we had before to this technology. So we try to encourage the young ones to dance, to keep the traditions of beadwork, digging roots, getting our huckleberries, and the men, we encourage them to keep hunting and fishing, so they will have something going for our 7 generations. But the language is still going. They have some tribal schools that are learning. They teach the Chinookwawa, right, at Portland State. And I will be teaching the Sahaptin at Portland State next year.
Yes, sir. I'm TJ Quick on Athabasca, Muskogee Creek from Alaska. I'm also an artist. I just want to say thank you for this presentation. It's an honor that you're willing to speak. I was there in the fall, and I'm going to be there this spring to pray and to eat with you guys. My question is about this memorial or interpretation piece that's going to be put up by somebody who probably done a good job, and I don't mean any disrespect to this person or the artist. My question is why adorned or commemorating something, I believe it should be of the people of the land. Because it's like the Four Faces and the Black Hills is like a big slap to Indian country. So why have an outsider come in to do their interpretation? It should be the people of the land who wish to adorn it, to celebrate it their way. So my question is, and is there any talks or is there any feelings or was the native voice heard about someone coming in from the outside, doing what has been done, and then again doing their own thing to celebrate?
Thank you for your question. That has been a part of the conversation from the very beginning of Confluence Project. And part of the way that we wish to continue to work with artists from the region is through Gifts from Our Ancestors, which is an arts education program that is led by artist Lillian Pitt, some of you may know. And we get the chance to work with artists such as Ed Edmo and Nichi Wanapum, the canoe family from Warm Springs, to create art throughout the community with children in schools around the Celilo region. The decision to work specifically with Maya Lin is a long one, and I can speak to it as a member of the staff. I would encourage you to go to our website to kind of learn the story about how tribal members decided to ask Maya to be the one to work with them to help tell this story, in part because she is a nationally and internationally renowned artist and has tackled issues that has affected members of communities here, such as the Vietnam War. And so that's been an ongoing process. We've been working with members of tribes for the last 10 years. The design at Celilo Park is the 10th version, the 4th version that she's come up with through conversations about what is a way to help share the story. The work that Tom and Linda and others are working to help preserve the photos and to share them on site is part of the effort to give voice, and we hope that there will be an opportunity to have some other art in the park as well, so that the whole story can be told and shared. So it's a conversation that continues to go on, and that Maya is a part of, and that leaders such as Antone and members of the tribal councils of the 4 tribes with treaty fishing rights there have been a part of all along the way. So thank you for your question.
I don't have my glasses on, so wave your hands. Oh, you're...
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bobby Begay. This was my aunt, Karen Jim here. My grandfather was Chief Howard Jim, and the current chief, Olson Meanus, is my oldest cousin. So my lineage goes back into the village as well. But I was very honored to see that gentleman get up and ask this question, because my auntie has asked me to speak on behalf of the village, the community, because we ask that same question every day. Because we feel it's an honor for Maya Lin to work with our artist, not our artist working for somebody overseas. Because it's our history, our livelihood. And some of us in the village don't really want this walk, because it's already been taken. It's inviting more people. And it's hurtful to us to be invaded again. Because this river we live on consisted of 9 bands from a place we call Cascade Locks up there to Boardman. There was 9 original Indian tribes, Indian bands. And those were Columbia River Indians. And before, there was over 7,000 Indians who lived on the river. And as you heard, you see this feast. There used to be 2 to 3,000 Indians who lived in a village during the fish runs. Now, 78 people live in Celilo. 78. All our people are gone because of the Enrollment Act. They were forced to the reservations, given plows, given horses. They made us leave. The Corps of Engineers bombed our villages, forced us to leave. They started to scare us away. This is the reality of where our people come from. And we're here, and we never left. So we follow the unwritten law. Our law is in our songs, in our language. It's in our own tongue, our own words, from Mother Earth, the river, the spirits. And we hold that in our heart. But you know, like Linda's saying, she said she's got to teach now. Because a few years ago, the president wanted to take away our treaties. Governors want to dishonor our treaties. And that's the truth. So we have to write our law. Virginia Beaver Yakama Nation had to go to the University of Oregon and have a Sahaptin class to show proof that we have our own law, our own words. And it's sad we have to put it in a book, on CDs and DVDs, to prove who we are. But we're still here, and like Linda said, she wants you all to come to our salmon feast. So I'm stepping up here and helping Linda invite you guys to our salmon feast. It's April 14th. It's always the second full weekend of April, and it's open to the public. It's our sacred food. No charge. We're not greedy Indians. Because the Creator never charged us for our fish. He never charged us for our yamash, our deer, our roots, our berries. We gather those with our own hands. It was a gift. And we wash all that down with chush, the water. Because water gives life to everything, all of us. So that much I wanted to say, and thank you for, I didn't really plan on speaking, but my auntie forced me to, and so that's all, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming here tonight. Allie, did you want to say something?
As we all know, good work needs support, and one way that support comes is through money. And so I wanted to just make sure to acknowledge the generosity of folks who are supporting this endeavor to help preserve the photos and images that you saw today and that we'll be able to share with you. Brought and Mary Bishop from Pendleton Woolen Mills have been big leaders in this. The Oregon Cultural Trust has given us a grant to help do this work. Spirit Mountain Community Fund has given us a generous grant to help with this work as well. And we've also received a grant from the Oregon Heritage Commission, as well as monies from folks like you who decide that this is something that you want to help support. So on behalf of Confluence and everyone else that we're working with, thank you very much.
Thanks to all of you, and please give another round of applause for our three speakers tonight.